Okay, Assalamualaikum Pak Hassan dan juga Puan Yasmin. Terima kasih kerana dapat datang dan buang masa kat sini.
English.
Yeah, I forgot. Sebenarnya what we're doing now is preparing video clips for educational purposes, especially for polytechnic list where there will be video and film course yang akan diadakan soon, maybe next year or something like that. Plus, this interview will be used by all media and also design students, from architecture to graphic design and that, because it constitutes under visual studies. So what we'll be saying here today will be a sort of inspiration and motivation to all students who are under the banner of visual studies. So hopefully you get a good 1 hour or 2 hour punya content. Inshallah, alright. Okay then, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So kita begin with a bit of history. Kalau boleh, a brief introduction of yourself, Pak Hassan first, and then Puan Yasmin, of yourself, your family, where you were from, siblings, and etc.
Me first. We're from Muar, but we've travelled along the way because my parents were transferred from here, there and everywhere, so they told me they would probably dipecat also by some stage. Lepas tu, I was sent to England at the age of 15, and I was there for 9 years. I hated every day, and half the time I was watching movies. I remember seeing Taxi Driver every day for about 6 days in a row. I didn't know why, and I didn't even know what Palm d'Or meant. I just thought this film was so mesmerizing. You know, Alice doesn't live here anymore. I saw also Scorsese. I thought Scorsese sounded some sausage, so I just saw his film without knowing anything about film. I knew I was fascinated by the story that was told. I graduated in psychology from Newcastle. It's a completely useless degree, no matter what psychology students might tell you. It doesn't do anything for you. Tests your resilience, that's what degrees do, kan? They see that you got it. You got stamina, that's all. And then I worked in a computer company. In a bank before that for 2 weeks, computer company for a year. And then to advertising by accident. Everything that I've ever done or gotten into, I did by accident. I never had any ambition. Life's too short for that sort of thing. I think my only ambition is if I have a piece of paper or a job to do in front of me, I do it the best I can. And that's my ambition, to make this job the best I can. I learned much later that Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi used to say that while you're cleaning the toilet, it seems far more important than politics. I understand what he meant. When you're doing something, do the best you can. Doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's halal.
Okay, thank you. Pak Hassan?
I was born in Alustar, Kedah, just a few houses away from where Dr. Mahathir lived. And my auntie and everybody, they were very poor. They went to his clinic free of charge. His sisters gave them money. So maybe a little bit of that maybe rubbed off on me, went over to the house on the other side. But I think my earliest memory is when I was 2 years old, fishing with my cousins on the river behind the house. So that was it for Alustar. Then we moved to Penang. So we were there for quite a long time until I came to Kuala Lumpur in 1964. So I was, I think, a failure in school, failure in the sense that I didn't make it like all the other guys. But I think looking back, probably I have done more things than all my friends who made it. And today I think they are very envious of me. One of them said so. I'm entirely self-taught in art and so on. I failed in art in school, and my art teacher said, don't take art next year. If I listen to my teacher, then I won't get anyway. So anyway, film, I loved film when I was in secondary school, because we had these film shows every week, and I would never miss it, and I would be the guy who would be switching on and off the lights. I love that. And some of this film stuck in my mind. So maybe, everything fell into place. But I had no ambition, didn't know what I was going to become. Similar,
doing a couple of bumps.
So today when I read all these motivational books, they say you must have this, you must have that. Is that so? I just did something that I loved, I tell my students, love what you do. It's going to take you where you are ultimately going to be. Yeah? So I think that's very important to love what you do. But that will take you, carry you a long way. So whatever I've done, I have enjoyed. And when I was with government service, I don't think there was a day that I felt I did not want to come to work, even though I had problems. I loved to come to work to solve problems. And I think that probably showed when I went for the interview. There were 10 people before I came to Film Negara. And I was the only one who got it. And 22 years later, I met the guy who had interviewed me. And we were on the same panel. Imagine that. And I asked him, why did you choose me above all these people? He said, one, you had distinction in English we had never heard of. This was 1967. And then he said, you taught yourself. You didn't wait to be sent for a course and so on. And number three, you were doing a job called window display, which we had never heard of. At that time, Robinson's was the only department store. And we were doing art with our window display. So I read all these books from USS Library, copied a bit, and managed to get one award in Hong Kong, some more other. So it was fun. And getting into film was probably because when I went to Film Negara, I had the opportunity. And one of the good things about the Director Generals at that time, whoever wanted to do something, they gave you the chance. So I think that's the reason why probably we were given a free hand. I managed to get into film, and my first film was in 1972. It was the Christmas trailer. And then of course it developed, and then I got into live action shooting. My first live action won an award at the Sri Angkasa for Best Idea, and we shot it in a University Malaya, University Hospital for 2 days, and there was things went on from there.
What is actually film all about?
Actually, I can't tell you what film is, but when I see it, I can tell you. So, Mizoguchi, Kurosawa, Ozu, these are people who make films. Of course, you got to see what is film, what is movie. Yeah? Movies are the kind of film that is like a quickie. You want money, and you want people to enjoy, go there, no need to think. But films are in a class by themselves. To me, a good film must have these three things. Number one, it must entertain. But then, of course, you have to see, does it entertain you emotionally or intellectually? I go for both. Number two, it must have something to say. This is the silly thing that reporters always ask. What is your message? Films don't carry messages. But we have something to say. Who was it who said? Was it Scott Fitzgerald who said, it is not because the filmmaker wants to say something, but he has something to say. That is the intention. And then he creates a story, wraps it. The story is the wrapping to deliver what he wants. Number three, it must reflect the culture of a nation or a people. If these three things are there, you can say it is a film. Otherwise, it's just a movie, and you can see a lot of those movies in Malaysia at the moment, which cannot make it overseas because people can see it is so shallow and superficial.
We are still confused. There's no message in the film, and yet there is intention.
No, there are messages in a film, except that the filmmaker did not start out to send a message, but he had felt something very deeply about the subject, or he felt very strongly about an issue, and then he expressed himself in the way that he best knows, which is through film. And there are films that touch you very deeply. For instance, like Yoji Yamada is a director that's not been recognized yet, but his Twilight Samurai, you can see what he's trying to say. The word twilight itself is already there's so much in just that one word, because twilight means the sun setting. It can be a metaphor for people who are about to go, or it could be about the loss of something, of a tradition, something like that. But you know, André Bazin, the French film theorist who had never made a film but is very famous, he said that the cinema screen is a window through which you see the lives of others that reflect your own life. And Teguh Karya told me the same thing, the Indonesian director. He said, I put you on the screen. If you can see yourself among the characters, then I have succeeded. He's saying basically what Bazin is saying without going into this highfalutin language.
I think we're all vicious that collect things from society. And there's some of us want to tell stories, and we tell stories every day. Everybody tells a story. Oh, I went to the market, and there was this man who was really rude to me, so I scolded him. These are stories. Our mothers tell stories, you tell stories, and you're going to put this into a video, and it's going to be a story for students to watch. But I think that in the end, perhaps some storytellers surface in society, and I hope it will happen to me one day. You surface, and suddenly people regard your stories as meaning something more than just the man who was rude to me at the market. From that point of view, I've always been a storyteller, and I have tried telling stories with painting. I've tried telling stories with poetry. I've tried telling stories with short stories, by debating, by acting, music. I've composed music, and I realize now that all I've been wanting to do is to tell a story. Even in my storytelling compulsion crept into my advertisements until people say, Yasmin, are you making commercials or are you making films? You know, you're telling grandmother stories. But it has worked from a marketing point of view, which means, for example, for Petronas, those grandmother stories I was telling in my commercials, have, while other petrol companies have had their sales remain almost stagnant, Petronas has caught up and might overtake them. So which means even in the world of business, storytelling has a place. How would you say? So film I got into, I think God has things planned for me. I just flow like a log down a river. And now it's film. I never really planned to be into film. It's just the next logical thing. If my dad hadn't collapsed 2.5 years ago from diabetic complications, I wouldn't have thought to make films. I've been perfectly happy telling stories in my commercials. So what is a director? A director is just like everybody else. But like I said, perhaps some people will surface, and suddenly you find them on top of a hill, telling stories that people want to hear, not just grandmother stories. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Qualities for a storyteller. Are there certain qualities to be you must have so that you become a good storyteller?
I'm sure there are many definitions of what a good story is or what a good storyteller is. The only definition I know is my own. When I hear a story or watch a film or listen to a song, the only thing I ask from it is that I feel its sincerity and that I'm emotionally moved by it. I laugh, I cry. I don't much go for films that make me think too much because I'm an intellectually lazy person. Don't make me think so much. But I do like feeling. But you know what? In the end, I think that feeling is advanced thinking. Just as I believe that philosophers are advanced mathematicians, musicians are advanced mathematicians. I really think that. I think that we can only calculate our way about in life for so much, and then we have to slip into philosophy and feeling. So I think that the intellect are like my arms and my legs and my mouth and my eyes. They are there to serve the purpose of my heart. So for me, emotion is key. Above all, I find God through my emotions, not by calculating. So it must be something reliable.
But
Making sense?
But if we are in the business of training future storytellers, how should we go about preparing them to become good storytellers?
I have not been in a position to have an audience of students from which I'm supposed to nurture good storytellers. But if I were in that position, I can tell you how I would do it. What I would do is look for people whose personalities tell me. I would get to know them as people first. And I think by doing that, I will know whether they have stories to tell, whether they have lived, and if they have lived in ways which interest me. And only then will I teach them the craft of storytelling. But I think most importantly that they had stories to tell. I meet people every day, and half the people I meet have nothing to tell. They have no stories to offer, and the stories they have to offer are of no interest to me. So if I had 100 students in front of me, the first thing I would do is to be their friend. I think that's how I deal with my people at work. Be their friend and discover things inside them. Usually there's something promising in everybody. God is fair. I think the people with the most interesting things are the ones who will probably pass, and I will do my best to teach them the craft of bringing out what they have inside.
Hassan, what would be a good story?
Well, I remember the quotation from Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau, the poet. He said that stand up and live before you sit down to write. That's the most important thing.
How vain it is to sit down and write before you have stood up to live.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so the other day at PWTC, the Indian Film Festival, Yasmin said that she's very worried about her country because people are writing from their imagination and not from their experience, which I totally am in agreement. Just take Hemingway. Whatever he wrote about, he had experience. And I don't think anyone can become a good writer if he has not come to the age of 40. But if you have not done anything within that 40 years, also is not any point, isn't it? So if from a very young age you have gone on your own, you have gone to countries or you meet people who are better than you are, there will be stories coming out from you. But if you are living in an environment which prevents or which is trapping you within this kind of environment that doesn't make you think out, which is to a certain extent is happening in Malaysia. Who was it who said that history is written by the people who are in power or something like that?
Yes.
So this is the sad part. I think this is the reason why we are not getting great stories coming out from Malaysia. Dr. Anwar Norai said that Malaysian soil is not fertile. He's using a metaphor, because the Indians, the Chinese and the Malays who came to Malaya at that time to look for what? For food. So the philosophers never leave their countries. If they do, they are not true philosophers. So those great people never came out of their country. And the people who came here were the people who just wanted. So what kind of mentality do you think you're going to have? We don't have great novels. We don't have great films. We are beginning to see the great films now. Why? Because the Indies are coming into the picture. And these are the people who read. So reading is so important. It may not make you a better writer, but it will not make you any worse than what you were before. At least,
can reading substitute for experience?
to a certain extent, if you read autobiographies or biographies, because once you go into the minds of people who have succeeded, you'll find that they are ordinary people like you, and this inspires you, and then it begins to reach out inside. If your writing does not come from inside, it's just coming from the 3-act structure, the plot points and so on, those are just steps. But once you have crossed the bundle and go into the house of a person, it is a totally different thing. You don't think about where you were before. So you have to also go beyond what you are. If you're just keeping to the rules, you're not going to get anywhere. Hollywood will not get anywhere if they're still using the 3-act structure. It is only when the Europeans came in the 60s that Hollywood cinema began to change, because people were breaking boundaries.
Now we go into this. Suddenly we are being told they are mainstream films, they are alternative films. So actually, what are they? What is the difference or the similarity between mainstream and alternative?
Well, we have to have some kind of category so that people can understand, isn't it? So that you can go on to other things. Recently, I was the moderator at the Indian Film Festival. So they were talking about parallel cinema in India. So parallel cinema means it's going together with mainstream. So there are actually basically two kinds of films. One is genre, the other one is author. Genre, both are French words. Genre means a certain kind of storytelling that you can predict what's going to happen, a lot of conventions. But we can say it's mainstream cinema and alternative cinema. But in between, you have something called crossover cinema that has a little bit of the popular approach, but at the same time, something very deep is being said. And Swades by, what's the name of the director? I can't remember. Shah Rukh Khan acted.
Who made Lagan?
Yes. That's a very good example. And that one you can say it is seni untuk negara rather than seni untuk seni, which is the alternative cinema, like Sanctuary and so on. And to a certain extent, even SEPET, Rabon and Uwe making his films, they have one foot here, one foot here. They use some popular actors who are very recognizable and so on. So they do that for a reason. But they have something very serious that they want to get across. So you have mainstream cinema atau film arus perdana atau film popular, dan film alternatif atau film peribadi yang sangat peribadi kepada pembikin filem. Tidak ada istilah film seni, film artistik, film estetik, film komersial. Film komersial itu komersial 30 second lah. Tapi academics are making a fool of themselves. They open their mouth, they put a food inside their mouth. And wartawan hiburan pun macam tu, mengelirukan student tau. So this has got to stop lah. So I hope that people begin to understand, what is the correct istilah. Orang putih tak pernah keliru dengan istilah. Mainstream cinema uses the basic 3-act structure, but they also have the 2-act structure and the 5-act structure. 2-act structure will be Full Metal Jacket. Godfather 1 will be the 5-act. Tapi because Kubrick made it, there's also a certain element of an alternative film there. But his stories are very character motivated. Most of the Hollywood movies are plot motivated. That means first this happens, then this happens, then this happens. But in character motivated stories, what happens in the mind of the character, what the character feels, is actually creating the plot. So when Aristotle and of course Robert McKee, when they said character is plot or character is action, that means they are talking about character motivated stories. So if you can create characters that are very strong, like Piramli films, that's why his stories are so good, because the characters are very powerful. People recognize the character. They said, there's such a guy in my kampung, Haji Bakil or S. Samsudin and so on. That's why they are strong. And SEPET is very strong because of the characters. You begin to feel for the characters, and then you have got your audience. One of the things that we must recognize in mainstream cinema is the persona. In psychology, the persona is the character that you're presenting on the outside. Hollywood has taken this and placed it into the star system. So the character that they choose, Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise and so on, they can only act for certain kinds of stories. So there is the kind of convention in mainstream cinema that if you want this kind of story, you've got a 3-act structure. This is the kind of person who's got to act. So I think many of the actors in Hollywood, people like Robert Redford, they want to break away from this because they want to go into character actor punya role. So we got to differentiate all of this, and I think this is the first step before you want to get people to understand about script writing and so on.
We go straight into SEPET now. What is the main idea of SEPET?
Actually, SEPET, when I was, of course, 7-8 years ago, I had just run away from my ex-husband. I was a bit bored and a bit emotional. And then I heard about people talking about teenage love stories being a big thing in this country. And I saw some, and I thought that some of them could have been less patronizing to the audience. So I wondered to myself whether it is possible at all in this country to write a script about something as common and as everyday as teenage love story, and make it something that's more sincere and less insulting, if you like, that can be enjoyed by all people of different levels of society. So I wrote it as an attempt to see whether I can make I just wanted to write a script. I wasn't interested in making a film. Just write a script. And then I saw True Romance, script by Quentin Tarantino, directed by Tony Scott. And it's a love affair. And it's about a love story that happened instantly. And I thought, and then I reread Romeo and Juliet, because I was very bored. I was on leave for 2 weeks and away from my husband. And I realized that that people have done it for donkey's years. People have been doing teenage love stories that are so endearing, so real, so sincere, so touching, and so clever in some ways. So why can't we do it? So that's why I sat down and wrote it.
Hassan, what do you think of SEPET?
Rabun. See the word Rabun and SEPET, just one word. So Rabun, the question that I asked, siapa sebenarnya Rabun? SEPET, siapa sebenarnya SEPET? So Rabun ni macam orang mata tak open.